We interrupt this record to bring you a special bulletin. The reports of a flying saucer hovering over the city have been confirmed.
Did you really go out with an alien? Uh-huh. What was it like? Real different.
Becoming Human, a Mork and Mindy podcast. Hello listeners, this is Paula Schaffner with episode 55, Mork's New Look, which somewhat appropriately aired on New Year's Day 1981. The IMDb synopsis is, Mork goes to see a plastic surgeon. This is the 43rd Mork and Mindy episode directed by Howard Storm and the 13th written by April Kelly. This time there's no exterior, we just start right in the Da Vinci's new restaurant. Kathy exits the restroom and walks over to the table where Fred and Mindy are sitting opposite each other. She puts her hand on Fred's shoulder and they smile at each other as she sits next to him. Mindy tells Kathy that she was just saying to her dad that we, meaning her and Mork, hardly get a chance to see you two anymore. They've been gone so often. Kathy says she has missed their wicked little stepmother-stepdaughter talks. Although, of course, she's not a wicked stepmother. But it really has been a busy concert season. Fred agrees. He says Kathy plays a wonderful flute, but maybe he's been working her too hard. As you recall, he's her conductor. He demonstrates how she's been eating her celery by miming playing it like a flute. Remo, who's holding a coffee pot, comes over and says Kathy didn't finish her eggplant.
All right, shoot it to me straight. It's too spicy, too much garlic. Not enough rosemary, is that right?
No, it was delicious, Remo. I'm just watching my figure.
You don't have to. Every guy in the place is watching it for you.
Oh.
You lucky old dog, you. I didn't mean old. I meant... Oh, you're older than me. Well, excuse me while I go away flustered.
This is the first we've seen Remo since the season opener, and this is the last we'll see of him this episode. There's no sign of Jeannie, and they have definitely cut back on the Da Vinci's. We get a more awkward Remo than usual, both because he tries to give Kathy a compliment, and then it kind of turns into an insult to Fred, and he has to excuse himself. I want to know why Kathy is worried about her weight. There are definitely some mixed messages about looks in this episode. Kathy asks what happened to Mork. Wasn't he just going out to check on the movie times? Fred says the phone is just outside. It shouldn't have taken him 20 minutes to call the theater. Mork runs in to great applause. He says men a bunch of times. He's so excited to see a movie tonight. He hopes it's a musical comedy with an RR rating. Like his bark laugh and like an R-rated movie. There's a cut to Fred and Kathy looking amused. Mork sits. Mindy asks what took him so long. He was on the phone with a wonderful woman. She was really nice and gave him all the times through the theaters. He would have been here earlier, but she kept repeating herself. He didn't want to hang up because that might be rude. This was before the Mr. Movie Time era where it was automated with a national service. I vaguely remember this era that there would be a number to call for a specific theater or maybe in a particular town. People would still look up movie times in newspapers, which I think actually continued into the aughts, but certainly this is a different era, definitely pre-internet and pre-smartphone. Kathy says this might have been a recording. Mork says it will never make the top 10. It has a nice beat, but it's hard to dance to, and that's at least the second American Bandstand reference. He takes out his silver notepad and it has all the theater times. He says the movie is playing at 14 theaters and he starts to recite the theaters and the times. Mindy interrupts him to ask when their movie starts. The movie that they're going to see may have been playing more than one place, but I think what she means is what time is it playing at the theater that they've chosen. He realizes he never found that out and he puts his hand to his head. He says he'll get back to them in 20 minutes. She yanks him back to the chair and says no a few times. She puts her hand on his shoulder to keep him seated. She says they'll drive over to the theater and take their chances.
You know, Mark, I can never tell when you're serious.
Oh, neither can I, but it's usually when I go like this.
This is only the second episode where Shelley Fabares appears as Kathy McConnell, although she is referred to in various episodes. We can assume that she's had some contact with Mork since she got married, but she's still trying to figure him out. And of course, she doesn't know he's an alien, and I don't think she ever finds out. Mindy says she's looking forward to seeing 10. Mork says if he knew they were going to see 10, he would have had his suspenders cornrowed, and that's a reference to how Bo Derek wears her hair in the movie. And this suggests that he was trying to find out the movie time without knowing which movie they were going to, so that makes it even more complicated. Kathy saw the movie when Fred was out of town. It was so funny, she wanted him to see it too. Fred thinks it sounds a little far-fetched. Who would believe an attractive young woman falling for an older middle-aged, and then he stops himself. Kathy just looks at him and he realizes. He says maybe art does tend to imitate life. Fred stands and puts on his cap. A middle-aged man in a suit comes over and recognizes him as Fred McConnell. This is Bob Turnbow, who Fred hasn't seen since high school. Fred introduces his wife Kathy, his daughter Mindy, and his, Mork. Because he still doesn't know how to describe Mork. It's not his son-in-law, it's not his daughter's boyfriend. He could say his daughter's roommate, I guess. Mork says, that's, me, Nanu Nanu. Mindy stops him from offering the Nanu Nanu handshake, so he flutters his hand and puts it away. Kathy says it's nice to meet Bob, and she holds out her hand. He says, my God, Fred, your wife, she's beautiful, as he shakes her hand. I mean, Shelley Vaporice was very, very pretty, but everybody in this episode is reacting as if she's the most stunning woman in Boulder. Bob calls Fred an old dog, even though he's the same age, and says, how did you meet her? Was she helping you across the street? Like a Boy Scout helping a little old lady cross the street.
I always have enjoyed your sense of humor, Bob.
Oh, me too, Bob. Look under the hat for another surprise.
Say, Bob, you know, it's amazing, but you look the same as you did years ago. Exactly the same.
Well, I'll tell you my secret, Fred. Plastic surgery. Changed my whole life. I improved my best parts and threw out all the rest. Listen, I gotta run. Say goodbye to that beautiful young wife of yours, will you? Listen, I'm sorry I gotta fly, but I'm meeting my date at Rawhides. We're riding double on the mechanical bull.
There's definitely some stuff in this episode about Fred being bald. Bob looks nice, but he doesn't look like he's 18. He's played by Angus Duncan, who was then 44. He worked from 1959 to 2003, and then he died in 2007. He's fine in the role, nothing real memorable. Yes, there's a reference to a mechanical bull, which is the second, but probably not last, urban cowboy reference. Fred sourly says Yahoo, like a cowboy, and flaps his chin like he thinks he has a double chin. He goes back to the table, grumbling about Bob saying he improved his best parts. Fred would be happy with what Bob threw away. He sits down again. Mork tells him, cheer up, Pops, and then he says that wine and cheese improve with age, and it's not Fred's fault that he's not wine or cheese. Mindy punches Mork's arm. Fred looks unhappy, and Kathy looks concerned. There's a sunny exterior of the house with flowers blooming. In voiceover, Mork encourages Bebo to try another trick. He has him play dead. Mork says, oh, those amazing Naga chomps. So another reference to the TV show, Those Amazing Animals. He says something about rigor mortis because Bebo was playing dead. This scene doesn't really impact the plot. It's just a cute little thing with him and Bebo. When there's a knock, Mork says that there's an earthling at the door. He tells Bebo to either slip into his Boomer costume or take a hike. And that's a reference to the dog Boomer, who was the star of the NBC TV show Here's Boomer, which ran from March 1980 to August 1982. And it was sort of a TV version of the Benji movies. He's basically telling Bebo to put on a dog costume. Bebo exits to the bedroom, burbling in a deeper voice than usual. The audience briefly claps. Mork closes the bedroom door. He says, entree. Fred lets himself in. Mork calls him Pops. Fred asks if Mindy is here. Mork says she's in the tub with Mr. Suds. I thought this was a reference to Bubble Bath, but I think I was thinking of Mr. Bubble. Fred hesitantly says he wants to talk to Mindy about something personal. Mork says, oh, I see. It's part of your McConnell life. I can't mix share. Which sounds a bit like McDonald's and all their Mc things.
I understand after I insulted you last night at the restaurant that, well, even though I was doing it in friendship, that I can accept this. I can, yes. I can accept it. I can even live with it. He hates me. No. I don't need your pity. I don't need your pity.
Mark. I didn't mean to offend you. I'm just troubled about something.
Oh, I've always hoped that you would look to me as a son because I've always looked to you as, well, Mindy's father. Let's seize this moment to make our relationship closer. Let me in, Fred.
Okay.
We can see Conrad Janis struggling not to break character. This clip and this episode in general shows another step in their quasi-father-in-law, son-in-law relationship. We've seen in the past that Fred has confided in both Mork and Mindy, but here he ends up just confiding in Mork and not in Mindy, which impacts the plot. Fred says just between them, so Mork shushes and says it's all right. Fred says he's been to a plastic surgeon. Mork says, why? Couldn't you find a real one? And the audience is very amused. Fred says she is a real one. Dr. Charlotte Dubin, one of the best. I thought it was interesting that they chose to make the plastic surgeon, who we don't see, a woman. They sit on the couch. Fred says he's 15 years older than Kathy. Conrad Janis was then 52, and Shelley Fabares, who is still alive as of this recording, was then 36, so it is about a 15-year age difference. Fred says, well, he can't make himself Kathy's age, he can make himself a lot younger. Mork says, you mean you humans can change your appearance? This will make an interesting report to Orson. He's actually wrong, it's a pretty forgettable report. Fred says everybody's doing it, and he says you can lift your eyes, fill in your chin, fill out your cheeks. Well, plastic surgery is popular. It's quite an exaggeration to say that everybody was doing it. Even in Hollywood, that wasn't true. Mork says it's wonderful. He asks if you could move your nose down to here, and he acts this out on Fred, sort of moving Fred's nose down to Fred's chest. He says it would be so much more convenient, and this is because it'd be right next to the handkerchief in the pocket of Fred's suit. Fred says he's doing this for Kathy. He spent a lot of years alone. Now that he has Kathy, he's going to do anything he can to keep her interested in him. Mork says, come on, Pops. I'm sure she likes you the way you are. I do. Fred thanks him, and Mork says, ah, shucks and wazoo. Fred says there's nothing wrong in looking your best, especially for somebody you love. They stand, and Fred thanks him for listening. Mork asks if Fred wants to tell Mindy his wonderful news. Fred says now that he's gotten it off his chest, he'll save it for later and surprise her. They go to the door, and Fred gets the overcoat he hung up. Fred says Mork helped him make up his mind. So again, Fred trusts Mork's judgment a lot more than he used to, although in this case, he probably shouldn't. Fred says tomorrow at 4, he's going to be a new man. This is something that comes up in sitcoms of the 70s and 80s where people go to a plastic surgeon and they make you think that it's going to just be immediate and rather than it's a long process and there's weeks of healing. All that would probably happen at 4 tomorrow is that Fred would get a consultation, which might be a new man internally. Mork says now that they've helped Fred remove his troubles, there's something that Mork has always wondered about. Very seriously, he asks, do you think Orson Welles should be made a national park? And so that's a reference to Orson Welles's size, but I think also his stature as a filmmaker and an actor. With an equally straight face, Fred says he's often wondered about that too. The audience is very amused by this exchange. Fred says, so long, Mork. He exits and closes the door. Mindy enters from the bedroom. She's wearing her robe, a towel on her shoulders, and she has wet hair. She's holding a washcloth and that mirror with the stand that we saw in the episode where she was considering dyeing her hair blonde. It was another episode where people thought about changing their appearance, although it wasn't anything as drastic as this. She asks if Mork has seen her eyeliner. Mork was using it to play connect the dots on his chest. He made a picture of Marie Osmond with hairy teeth. This is our first Osmond reference in a while. He hands her the eyeline pencil. She says, I bet it did. That is, make a picture of Marie Osmond. She needs the eyeliner to complete her makeup. Mork says, makeup on vous? She says, oui. An unusual instance of her speaking French back to him. He says men a few times. He asks if she would stain the painted desert. Would she flock the giant redwoods? Would she fill the Grand Canyon with cheese whiz? He says, nay, 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 nay. She says, thank you very much. With his arm around her, he says she's very, very special. The way her nose kind of veers to the left, the way her eyes sparkle, especially the greener one, the way her chin comes to that lovely point, so convenient for opening beer cans. You think he's going to sweet talk her, but actually he's insulting her, but in a very poetic way. She thanks him again. Mork says they could all use a little improvement, especially for those they care about, right? And she says, right. He says, remember that movie we saw, 10? She says, yeah. He asks her who her perfect 10 is. She says, present company accepted. And he says, bless you. She goes to the old standbys, Newman, Redford, and Cronkite. And of course we heard on the episode with the ghost town that she thinks that Robert Redford and Paul Newman were handsome in Butch and Sundance. And we've had Cronkite mentioned many times before, including Mark suggesting that he was dating Lola. Then Mindy says she always thought that she'd like to meet a guy like her dad. In her eyes, he's always been the perfect 10. You can take it in kind of a Freudian way. We did see in the season opener that much as she loves her father, she doesn't want somebody with his personality. I don't think she's saying she wants somebody with his looks, although that will be how Mark takes it. Spoiler. But it's brought up that her dad is perfect to her, and people accept this. She says she's got to dry her hair. She's going to be late. She never explains to where. She's unemployed. She's not going to school. I doubt she's dating anymore. Could just be a social call. Maybe she's hanging out with Jeannie, who she's been neglecting for Glenda Fay.
Oh, no, allow me, allow me.
Oh, you do hair too?
Oh, honey, I'll do anything I can. What's up for you now here? Let's just give you a little blow dry here. That's all we can afford today. Let's work on it now. First, we'll tease it. You know, yesterday this woman came in the shop. She said, make me look like Cheryl Teagues. I said, honey, I'm a beautician, not a magician. Come on. Boy, I can't tell you. She wanted me to give her a facial. I said, I don't have a sandblaster. Oh, whoa, this is incredible. I looked at this. The other lady came in, and she liked to look like the Bo Derek, you know, like that. So I said to her, I put like magnetic beads in her hair, and she followed a bus for a mile. That's it. One more blow dry. Oh, there you are. You're done. Get back on the street.
Thank you, Mr. Moore.
Oh, bless you, child.
Thank you very much.
Bless you. Susan B. Anthony.
I thought it was interesting that Robin Williams didn't play this as a stereotypical gay hairdresser. The subtitles describe it as a Hispanic accent. I'm not really sure what he's going for here. I have stolen that teasing your hair joke at least a couple times in my life. He refers to Cheryl Teagues, the famous model. I believe that the I'm a beautician, not a magician joke was one that he would reuse. It sounded familiar. Maybe somebody stole that. There's another reference to Bo Derek and her cornrows, and there's a reference to the Susan B. Anthony dollar. I don't remember if it's come up on the show before, but it was minted from 1979 to 81, and then again in 99. They were trying to include a woman on U.S. currency or coinage. It was not a big success, partly because the size and look of it was a little too similar to Washington on the Quarter. I think the implication is that Mindy is a feminist, and so she would tip him. Mark picks up the mirror, looks at it, covers it, and then looks again. He makes faces into it and he spins it. It might be a two-sided mirror, like where one side is larger. The audience laughs and claps at this. Mark guesses he could stand a little improvement, and those years of sitting on his face are beginning to show. Thought that was a nice callback, that even though he's not sitting on his face as much, it still affected him, just like if somebody was out in the sun without protection. He touches his face with both hands. He says he never should have sat on wicker. He guesses this is it. Perhaps he should do this for somebody he cares about. He's going to do it for Mindy.
That's it. That's right. I'm gonna do it. Mark's new look. Maybe I'll be like Diane von Seckenberg. Will someone loosen my hair so I can blink?
So we get a title drop there. Diane von Seckenberg is a pun on Diane von Furstenberg, the famous designer. There's a sunny exterior of the Boulder Medical Center. Mark goes to a door that says Dr. C.J. Dubin, 687. He opens the door. We switch to the reception area. There's a gray-haired man in a suit sitting in one chair, and we'll see that he has a bandage over his nose. There's a middle-aged woman who's in a blazer, a turtleneck, and a skirt. They're both reading magazines, and there's more magazines on the table. There are lots of plants. Mark enters and shuts the door. He sits on the couch next to the woman's couch. There's a close-up of the man looking in Mark's direction. The woman says you have to let them know you're here. Mark softly thanks her, and then he yells his name, startling the woman. A young woman with wavy blonde hair, a white lab coat, and a turtleneck opens the shutters and looks around. Mark says it's voice-activated shutters. The blonde lady asks if she can help Mark. He goes over to her and calls her Doc, and starts to talk about his list of changes. She says she's not Dr. Dubin, she's the receptionist, so I guess that's one reason why they decided to make the off-screen doctor female, is so that there could be this confusion with the receptionist. She asks his name. He says Mark. She asks if this is his first name or his last name. He says yes it is. She says, I see. He says, no, I see spells ick. M-O-R-K spells Mark.
Oh, you must be the man who called in and wanted the doctor to shoot the works.
That's me. I mean.
Okay, well, the doctor will be with you in a few minutes.
Thank you!
We have 3 guest stars in this scene, although the man with the bandage doesn't have any lines, so he doesn't get a credit. The unnamed woman on the couch is played by Sandy Sprung, who was then 43, and she had roles from 76 to 95. But the one that I really love in this scene is Eileen Graff. She was then 31, and she had already played the role of Monique on Laverne and Shirley. She would, of course, go on to a longtime role as the mom on Mr. Belvedere. And she does so much with this little role, and I'm very happy to say that she will have a more memorable part to play in season 4. But even here, we can see her vitality. She just has this energy, and she's not just reading her lines. She also does well playing a straight woman, although you can see little bits of humor. And I feel like, although it's not a star-making role, you can definitely see her potential here and in her later scene. Since she shut the shutters after he yelled again, he says that the shutters work the same way. He goes back to his seat. He puts his list back in his pocket. He waits for a bit in silence, twiddling his thumbs. Then, out of nowhere, he says, "Wouldn't it be funny if the Broncos played the Colts? Then they'd have to call a foul instead of a foul." We've already, of course, had a whole episode about the Denver Broncos. The Colts are the Indianapolis team. The nameless woman just looks at him, then shakes her head and flips through what looks like a photo album. Mark asks if this doctor is any good. The woman says, "Certainly. She helped my husband with his crow's feet." Mark says those can really mess up the carpet, and I was sitting here going, you could have said those must be murder on the carpet. The woman looks baffled. Mark says, "Let me guess. Your husband had the crow's feet and you had the frog's legs." They both laugh together for a while, and then she angrily says no.
Actually, I'm getting her nose.
Oh, really? You know what I'd say if I were her?
What are you having done?
Well, I'm shooting the works. I'm gonna have my face tucked, my cheeks pinched, my bags packed.
Sir, the doctor will see you now.
Good luck.
Would you like to go in there and have a seat?
Oh, see? No thanks. That part's okay.
Mark insults a lot of people in this episode, but he does it good-naturedly. We learn that he's happy with his own butt. Sandy Sprung is okay in this role. Again, not real memorable. It's nice that the woman does try to be friendly. There's another sunny exterior of the house. Kathy is sitting at the dining table, and she seems to be looking at a photo album, although it's definitely not shots of plastic surgery. She asks Mindy if she's noticed anything strange about Fred. Mindy is pouring a cup of coffee. She says, "Strange? No, why?" Kathy stands and says Fred has been acting a little unusual lately. And I have to ask, what is the timeline on this episode? They go to the movie the same day as Fred meets his old high school friend. And then maybe a few days later, he comes over and talks about plastic surgery. He gets an appointment, and it's going to be 4 o'clock the afternoon after his conversation with Mork. Mork somehow manages to get an appointment with that same doctor earlier in the day, and in fact gets in to see the doctor before the 2 people that are already in the waiting room. In any case, enough time has passed that Kathy can refer to lately. She says the other day Fred asked if Kathy thought he'd look younger with his fringe permed. And I just have to say that would have been totally on brand for 1980 or 81. There were stranger hairstyles than that. Mindy says Dad said that? Kathy says he passed it off as a joke, but she's not sure. Mindy says she wouldn't worry about it. He's probably just going through a phase. Kathy hopes so. Some of this may be midlife crisis. At least that's what they're thinking. Kathy says the other night they were sitting in front of the fireplace sipping wine. It was very romantic. For more, I was thinking, like, is this really something you should be telling your stepdaughter? Also, what other night? Again, how much time has passed? Fred looked her right in the eye and said, "Kathy, darling, do you realize when you're 65, I'll be dead?" Shelley Fabares would turn 65 in 2019, and Comrade Janice actually lived until 2022. Mindy laughs and says it sounds like the middle-aged crazies. She sits on the bar stool and sips her coffee while Kathy continues to hold her cup. Kathy doesn't know what's making Fred act this way. She's never said anything to make him defensive about his age. Mindy says that Kathy is the best thing that's ever happened to her dad, which is really sweet of her. She says maybe he feels like he doesn't deserve Kathy.
Oh, Mindy, any woman would be lucky to have a man like your father.
Well, maybe he just needs to hear that a little more often.
Oh, but it's so obvious. I mean, I even told Mork this morning.
Mork?
Yes. He came over to borrow a cup of liquid plumber. Anyway, Then he asked me, what do you think is a perfect 10? And I said, Fred.
As with her previous episode, I really like the sincerity of Shelley Fabares' performance as Kathy. And yes, there's a reference to Liquid Plumber. There's a knock. As Mindy goes to get it, she says, "That's funny. He asked me the same question," meaning, "Who's your 10? And I gave him the same answer." Mindy opens the door and says hi to Lola and Stephanie, and she says, "What a surprise." I don't know if she knows that they visited the house at least once before. Apparently, they know her. She did meet Lola when she was still known as Amy, but we haven't seen her interact with Stephanie before this scene, if I remember correctly.
Hi, Mindy. We came over to see Mark.
Oh.
Do you have any ice cream you're not using?
Well, yeah, there's some over there in the fridge.
I know.
Oh. No, Lola, Mark hasn't gotten home yet.
Oh, I wanted to see how he turned out.
Oh, did you know him when he was a little boy?
Your friend has a delightful sense of the absurd.
This is Kathy. Hi. Lola, what did you mean by how Mark turned out?
He left the daycare center early today to go to a plastic surgeon.
A plastic surgeon? What for?
I heard him say he was going to shoot the works.
Shoot the works? Did he happen to mention what doctor he was going to go see?
Sure, he called from the center. It was Dr. Dubin.
Dr. Dubin. Great, thanks a lot, Lola. You've been a big help. I'll just look it up in the phone book.
I hope Mark doesn't get too many things changed. He had such a charming chaplain-esque quality. Come on, Stephanie. And you know you're out of whipped cream again.
So this is a very cute scene. It's not totally necessary, but we get both girls very much in character. Lola offers exposition, and she uses the term chaplain-esque and says that Kathy has a very absurd sense of humor. And by the way, Mindy doesn't say that Kathy is her stepmother, but maybe the little girls already know that. Maybe Mark has mentioned that. Of course, Stephanie is going for the food. We zoom in rather than out on the Boulder Medical Center. It's still sunny. Now Fred is in the reception area reading Life magazine with the 70s on the cover. So I assume that's an issue that came out in 1980. Now there's a young man in a suit in the chair where the older man in a suit was before. Mindy and Kathy enter. Mindy hopes that they're not too late. Fred hides behind the magazine. Mindy taps on the shutters. Kathy recognizes Fred. Mindy goes over and says, "Dad." He asks, "How's my little girl?" and he waves with his left hand. Mindy asks if Fred brought him here. Fred says, "Him? Who him?" She says, "Mark." He says no, and it's nice talking to them. He hides behind Life again. Kathy lowers the magazine and asks who Fred did bring here. He says, "Just little old me." Kathy asks what he would be doing at a plastic surgeon's. He asks, "What would you be doing at a plastic surgeon's?" Mindy says they came here looking for Mark. Fred asks, "What would Mark be doing at plastic surgeons?" My comment here is this is some of the most sitcom-y dialogue I've ever heard. Like a who's on first kind of rhythm, but nobody talks this way, but it's a prolonged misunderstanding. Fred says Mark doesn't have bags under his eyes, and then he realizes that he gave himself away. Kathy asks Fred what he's talking about. She sits on the coffee table facing Fred. Even though it's been a minute or two since Mindy tapped on the shutters, the receptionist now opens them and asks if she can help them. Mindy says no, meaning no way that she needs plastic surgery, and she clarifies, "I mean, I like the way I look."
A friend of mine came here named Mark.
Yes, Mark, I remember him. He's the guy that asked for some changes that would make Mr. Potato Head proud.
What did he have done?
Oh, I'm sorry. Patient information is confidential.
I really like the receptionist's combination of sympathy and amusement. My note here is IG nails it. Mindy tells Fred and Kathy that Mark was here, but he left, although that's not exactly what the receptionist said. Kathy wonders where Mark got the idea he needs plastic surgery. Fred says he got it from him. Kathy gives him a look. Fred confesses. Mindy thinks they should get home. Lord knows what Mark has had done. Of course, she's seen Mark create all kinds of disasters, including recently her Jeep falling through the floor, so she's probably picturing him doing plastic surgery on himself. Although, Mark was able to transform himself into an old man to make Cora feel less lonely, so I feel like he could do something with his powers that wouldn't actually be dangerous and make himself look better, at least what he thinks is better. Kathy and Fred stand, following her to the door. Fred swears he didn't know anything about it, meaning Mark wanting to get plastic surgery.
Cancel my appointment. I'll be back later.
Oh, anything you say, handsome.
I love Eileen Graff's delivery of the handsome line. Again, just doing so much with very little to work with. So Fred's appointment was at 4. This is January-ish. It's nighttime by the time they get home, according to the exterior of the house. The three of them come in with their coats over their arms. Mindy calls up to the attic, asking if Mork's there. He says, "No, I'm here. You're there." And then he does his bark laugh. She asks what he's doing in the armoire. He says he's just waiting for her to come home so he can make a grand entrance. Mindy fretfully asks why she hasn't gotten used to moments like these.
Little girl. Kathy, you look great. Hi, hon, you look great, too.
I don't believe this.
You know, he does look vaguely familiar.
You know, he does look vaguely familiar.
Now cut that out.
Now cut that out. You see, it's the latest thing from the Yves Saint Laurent. Notice the new wraparound hairline that any Hare Krishna would envy.
What are you doing?
Well, when I'm not dropping in on my perky daughter and her madcap roommate, I'm home with my lovely wife, Kathy, and saying, "How's my love kitten?"
More?
I feel like I'm listening to Bold Stereo. We thought you'd done something ridiculous at the plastic surgeon.
No, the doctor laughed me out of the office, so I had to do something ridiculous on my own.
Yeah. Where'd you get that thing?
Pierre Trudeau. Margaret said it was one of his throwaways. Oh, Min, didn't fool you?
Well, you had me going for a minute, but the latex stretch marks gave you away.
The audience reaction is understandably huge. We get Conrad Janis and Robin Williams playing off of each other. Mark refers to Yves Saint Laurent, like Yves Saint Laurent. Excuse my accent as always. And this is at least the second Hare Krishna reference. We get him referring to Mindy as Perky and himself as her madcap roommate. I thought that was an interesting choice of pet name, so to speak, where he as Fred calls Kathy Love Kitten. And I can't remember the names that Fred and his girlfriend had for each other on the episode where Fred's girlfriend was an editor who was possibly going to hire Mindy, and I feel like those were more embarrassing names, but it's faded for me by this point. We have Kathy referring to Bald Stereo. There's a reference to the Canadian Prime Minister Pierre Trudeau, and his, by that point I think, estranged wife, Margaret. Fred says this is very cute, but why is Mork him? Mork says Fred always says that you have to look your best for those you care about. Fred doesn't always say that, he just says that in this episode. And both Kathy and Mindy said that Fred was a 10. Mork thought, well, with all his other qualities, he might be an 11. That joke predates Spinal Tap. Mork guesses that he's done something wrong. Mindy says no, they just like him better the way he was. But he thinks he made another mistake. He bit the big watata again. I have no idea what a watata is, but it sounds like something pseudo-naughty, I guess. Mindy pats Mork's back. Mork says if he had a broom, he could leave here like Emmett Kelly. It's all right. Pathetic figure just departs. He pouts and shuffles off to the bedroom. Emmett Kelly was a little bit before my time, but I think I vaguely heard of him. He died in 1979, and he had a clown persona. I thought he did clown paintings as well, but I may be mixing him up with somebody else. Mindy excuses herself to go help her pathetic friend. After she exits, Fred says, "You said I was a 10?" And Kathy says, with a capital T.
All right, now look, I know what you're thinking, that a wife has a right to know when her husband is going to rotate his parts. But look, you're so pretty, and you're... Well, all right, I'll say it, you're so young. I mean, you don't even have a wrinkle. You don't even pucker when you soak.
Are you finished, old-timer?
Yes.
Sit down, Fred. If you want to have plastic surgery, that's fine.
It is?
Sure, if you're doing it for you. But if you're doing it to look better for me, then you're making a big mistake.
But I want to feel like I belong with you.
Fred, you are the most beautiful man in the world. You're kind, you're loving, you're sensitive, and it's written all over your face. Don't erase a line.
That's the nicest thing you ever said to me.
Something's wrong, men. They're not even talking.
It's nice to get these glimpses into the relationship, especially because much of it happens off screen. And in some ways, she's more mature than he is. I thought it was interesting the qualities that she admires in him are not outer beauty, they're inner beauty. And I know somebody in the audience squeals at their kiss, so that was cute. And I feel like by now Mork should know about kissing and making up, but maybe he's just trying to be funny. Kathy and Fred stand. She says they better get going. Fred says it's getting late. It's almost, and then with emphasis he says 7:30. Mork says 7:30, men, and he raises his eyebrows. Fred wants them to know that he's taken another look at this face, meaning his, although he literally hasn't. It's not like he picked up the mirror, but I think he means had another perspective on it. The face isn't so bad after all. Mindy awes. He tells Mork, next time you do me, I use my left hand when I say, how's my little girl? So Mork imitates that. Kathy laughs and says goodbye, kids. Fred says we 210s are going home. Good night.
Cute couple, man.
Oh, aren't they?
Well, it's almost 7:30, huh? You know what that means, don't you?
No, do you?
Brady Bunch reruns!
So Mork and Mindy get a little bit flirty here, although it ends very innocently with the Brady Bunch reruns, and the Brady Bunch, of course, had gone into syndication by that point. There's another nighttime exterior. Mork summons Orson. He calls him your beer belliness. So not just a fat joke, but implying that Orson drinks a lot. Bebo is by Mork's feet. Mork sings roll out the Orson, like roll out the barrel. And then as Lawrence Welk, he says, thank you, Judy and the sissy, for the lovely melody. Orson thinks Mork should respect his superiors. Mork says, hear that, Beeb? No gratitude from his fatitude. Give him a little attitude. And Bebo burbles. Orson insists on Mork's report. This week, Mork learned that Earthlings can change their appearance. They wear shoes to make them taller, girdles to make them thinner, so another girdles reference, wigs to make them hairier. Then they say, and he does a bit of a falsetto, darling, why don't you accept me for what I am? Shoes to make you look taller was more of a male thing, like Mr. Carlin on the Bob Newhart show, who also wore a toupee to look hairier. And girdles were more associated with women. Orson says bizarre. Mork says their bazaars are padded also, meaning brassieres. Mork says some Earthlings go to doctors to have bumps removed from their noses, and you won't believe where they put them. Anyway, Orson asks if these changes look better. Mork doesn't know about that, but they do make them feel better. Some of these changes are unnecessary. Most Earthlings change themselves because they think they don't look good to others, when the real problem is they don't look good to themselves. And he says it's a pity. Then he signs off. I generally don't like these plots about plastic surgery. It's not really something you can deal with in a half-hour sitcom format. And they're trying so hard not to offend anybody, so they don't want to say that plastic surgery is bad, but they also want people to feel good about themselves. And I wish that somebody had said to Kathy, you look fine, why are you watching your figure? She was dieting for health reasons, okay, but it just felt a little bit hypocritical to me. But it's used as an excuse to say how utterly gorgeous Kathy is, and so then Fred feels inadequate and old next to her. Nobody points out that Dudley Moore was not exactly typically Hollywood handsome. He was cute, but he was short. He still is with Bo Derek in 10. All that said, I do feel that special guest star as she is billed, Shelley Fabares, and of course Eileen Graff, add a lot to the episode. I already talked about Eileen Graff. In some ways, Kathy is a thankless role. You have to be this wonderful second wife. She does put little spins on it. We see the sincerity of her love for Fred, but she does get irritated with him. She talks sense to him, and he really needs that. So I like that a lot, and I think in a way Mindy is right that if she's not the best thing that ever happened to Fred, she's certainly one of the best things. Remo and the three other plastic surgery patients don't really make much of an impression. I do think the kids were cute. Like I said, not really necessary, but I kind of like just seeing Lola and Stephanie without the other kids. How do they work as a team? So that was nice. I rate each of these episodes on a 0 to 4 egg scale, which measures how well it delivers what I'm looking for in this series. I felt like this was better than some of the episodes this season, but not on a level of a 3. So I'm going with a 2.75, 2 3/4. It's got its flaws, but it had some cute, sweet, and sometimes funny moments. I did like the visual payoff and prolonged sequence of Mork as Fred. And yes, this gets into some weird Freudian territory with that as well. Overall, what works well. I also rate each of these episodes on a 0 to 4 heart scale, which measures how well it supports and promotes the romantic relationship of Mork and Mindy. This, as I've said before, so far is not a very shippy season. This one is a little bit tricky because Mork is planning to get plastic surgery because he cares about, and it's implied loves, Mindy, even though this is not what she wants. And we see earlier that what she cares about and loves about Mork is how he makes her laugh. I don't want to say it doesn't matter what he looks like. He's not movie star handsome either, but he certainly is cute enough for Mindy, and at times handsome. And she doesn't want him to change how he looks. I think even though she admires her father, she doesn't really want a man just like her father. As I said in the season opener, Mork went too much in that direction, especially with his personality. I don't think she wants a man who looks like her father. I would give this a 1.5 out of 4. It's shippier than some, but the focus is more on the Kathy and Fred relationship and how that's affecting the people around them. I would say don't skip this episode. It is worth tuning into, particularly if you want to see Shelley Fabares and Eileen Graff. Get a little more insight into Fred's character. 2 3/4 eggs, 1.5 hearts. This is Paula Schaffner with episode 55, Mork's New Look. Nanu, Nanu, new you.
It's time to face the music. It's time to make you see. The root of all your problems is that you don't look like me. Now this is gonna hurt you, but I just gotta say, you're not lost going nowhere 'cause you look like Doris Day. Who's the one that can't resist the brand new girl? Who's on the most wanted list of brand new girl? Honey, if you fix him eyes, guaranteed he'll get a rise. Believe that you can be a brand new, brand new, brand new, brand new, brand new, brand new girl.
You should have a solo career. You could have your own primetime TV series. We could call it Josie and run it right after Will and Grace.
Oh my God.